Morning, we continue our look through the New Testament, and we as a family, the St. Michael, are reading through the New Testament and started this journey with the new year. And we've made our way through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And if you were with us for Easter, that kind of led us into the end of Luke and the beginning of John. And so we continue that journey and look through John. And John is really famous, probably the most memorized book or memorized verse of the Bible, right? John 3:16. It's this awesome summary of the gospel in 2 verses. For God so loved the world, right? For God so loved the world. And so we think of John 3:16 often when we look at the book and we look at what it is that John is trying to tell the people around him. Well, I think it's an awesome verse, and it is a good one for us to memorize because we can really say what the gospel message is really succinctly with it. But I also think that there's more to the book of John. And as I was looking at the book of John, I looked at it through the lens of life and light. That kind of starts at the very beginning, those verses that Pastor Goff read for us. We see this theme begin to take a little bit of a run, and it runs through the whole gospel. And as I think of light and life, I think of flowers and plants. And so if you were here with us this summer, you'll have to forgive me because I asked our kids who did our brown bag not to bring anything dead or alive into church, but here I am bringing dead and alive stuff in. So we see a good picture of this idea of light and life, especially in the midst of darkness, through plants, right? As Celine pointed out, this plant that we had at our house, there's no life. It is dead. There's nothing coming out of it. Nothing can be produced from it. It is just kind of taking up space where it is. And so we see that element of what darkness can do. We also have plants that are fake, right? They may look good for a season, but they're going to fade. And really, they just sit on a shelf and collect dust a lot of times. And there's not much to them. They don't produce anything. They can help at times if we want to dust them off and make a place look beautiful, but there's no giving off of anything. And then we have plants that are alive. And how amazing is it that we still have plants living and beautifying our lobby and up here as well. But we see in these plants that with light, they have chlorophyll. They get this green, right? And even in that, the small plant may not be something you could eat, but it's giving off oxygen for us. So as it gets the light, as it receives the light, it's even giving off and producing something beneficial for the living beings around it, right? So even in its smallest amount, we see this element of life and light in this plant. And so we look at the book of John, especially these first few chapters, with that kind of thought going forward. And we see that John really takes this metaphor and he looks at darkness. And we have a sense of the world around us being a dark place, right? We have a sense that there are things that are beyond our control that are happening in the world around us that just make it a dark place. I had the privilege of going to the Redemption House Butterfly Gala. And the Redemption House is a court-appointed recovery home for women. And they do some magnificent things there. And they bring faith into the life of these women and the story of grace that connects them to Jesus. And one of the gals who were sharing her story began to share about her opioid addiction and how in the midst of that, she felt an overwhelming darkness that she couldn't even put words to. And yet, here she was talking about light. And so this metaphor goes on and on and on. But we know that there's an opioid crisis, and we see that in the world around us. And we scratch our head at times because we see the impact it has on our community. Maybe not us directly, but it does. And it gives us this idea that there is darkness. But that's not the only place darkness is. We all have darkness in our own lives in some way. And even if we look at the Oxford Dictionary, they have a definition of darkness being wickedness or evil. Sometimes that wickedness is things that we have even in our own head, right? The voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough, that start to snuff out some of the light that we feel and bring darkness in. It could be an addiction. It could be something else in your life that is snuffing out the light. Well, that's not where John leaves this story, right? He brings in the light that is life. But before we get to light, I just want to talk about another idea that's out there. And it's this idea that comes from postmodern philosophy. And it's the metaphysical, right? And so there is a writer, his name's Charles Taylor, and he writes a lot on postmodernism. And this is how he kind of puts religion, he casts religion. The religious people lost the sense of really great mystery, the sense that there's maybe something here we can't understand. And as he talks about this, what he really does is he says, well, you know what? That's a great thing for them to think about, but they may not be right. And these guys over here, that's a great thing for them to think about, but they might not be right. So you have to go and figure out what's right without really any clear direction. And so in this idea of that there's something larger out there, but we have no concept of even where to begin to look at it, we get this idea of kind of stalling out, being at a place where we're pondering and pondering and pondering, and we sit on a thought that we just can't get off of. And we may all know someone who is like this, who just can't come to a realization that there is something more, or that there is something that is directing that light and life that we have. And so, where do we land? We land with seeing the light that shines in the darkness. That's what Easter was all about, right? It's about Jesus coming out of that tomb so that we know his promises are true. And we get this metaphor in all kinds of different areas of our life, right? When you are little, you may think that there is something under your bed in the middle of the night, and that flashlight your parents have breaks through the darkness so that you know everything's okay. Or as an adult, maybe it's having gone camping and it's an overcast sky and you wake up needing to do something and you're disoriented. You don't know which way is up until you turn on your flashlight. This element of light and dark, right? We get it. We get that it was there in the beginning in Genesis. We get that it's a part of our lives. The energy that we see comes from this light. And that's how we define it, right? Like energy that's coming to us. And we get that sense of what that is when we walk outside on a warm day and we feel that warmth as light comes to us. And it's producing this energy. And that's where I go with the definition. I know some of you are more scientific, so I needed to throw up the electromagnetic radiation for you, right? But there's this idea that as light comes to you, there's more to the story, right? As light comes into a plant or it comes into a person, there's more that is happening than just this light that you can see. It's warming you. It's producing oxygen. And so as we hear John, and he's kind of giving us more of the picture of this metaphor in John 3, it says this is the verdict. Light has come into the world. And that's the celebration we had last weekend, right? And so as we look at that celebration, we can say, just as the kids try to, and we say, He is risen. Hallelujah. As we see Jesus risen, we know that He is a part of our lives, that He shines in the darkness. Even if the darkness is beginning to overwhelm us wherever we're at and whatever is happening in our lives, there's a glimmer of light because He is a living God. That tomb was empty. And so as we look at light and life, as we look at the book of John, my hope is this. My hope is that you are able to see light in the midst of darkness, right? Both physically with your eyes, but with that reminder of what our eyes see with light, that you're reminded of what God has done for you, bringing in forgiveness and love to bring a hope for tomorrow. And not only just bringing it in, but also asking us to produce, right? So if we have that energy from the sun, right, we are also giving that energy out. And so there's these fruits of the Spirit, this love, joy, peace, and patience that God produces in us because He is living and active in our lives. He's shining through our darkness. And as we produce those elements, those things that people can see in our lives, we begin to shine His light for others, connecting people to Jesus so that they in turn can see the light and they also know His love and forgiveness and the hope that we have in Him. Being connected to Jesus means knowing that His light is shining in our lives, that we can't be overcome with the darkness. And when it starts to come in, we see His light, His energy that He's bringing to us because He's come to us. He has come to us where we're at with His love and His forgiveness, bringing us hope. And so as we go from here, as we go into this week, as we read through the book of John, my hope is that you see this metaphor playing out. You see it in writing, you see it in your vision, but you also see it in your life. That light has come into the world. It shines in the darkness, which means it shines in our lives so that we can radiate that light out to the world around us, connecting people to Jesus each and every day. Amen.